Hi, I'm Kyle. I'm a product designer at, well, Care Evolution now, but I've been doing health tech stuff for the past few years. I was at Apple before that, and I was at Uber before that, and If This Then That before that. And yeah, I'm just excited to be here. So yeah, I'll go to Rid.
Hey, I'm Rid. I started a company and learned design as a result, and spent the last few years as a founding designer at Maven. I'm now kind of doing my own thing, figuring out how to build a media business at Dive Club and having fun doing it.
Hey everybody, my name is Darian Edwards. I was the founding designer of the Mailbox app. Some of you might have heard of it, Nike sneakers. Yeah, I've been around for a while. Been designing since the MySpace days. Don't want to age myself, but I've been out here for a minute. And now, yeah, like these guys doing my own thing. Yeah.
I'm Agree. I'm on the wrong side of the stage. I am also the co-founder of NUMI and FlowGlad. We'll talk about that later. And yeah, very excited to have you guys here. Thank you for coming out.
You guys know me. I introduced myself, but a bit different from these guys, but similar kind of area. My background's in creative strategy, so I worked as a strategist. If you're from the agency world, you kind of know what that means. But lots of intimate time working with design process, design thinking, and all that. So excited to have this convo.
Round of applause, everyone. All right. Oh, right. Yeah. What's going on tonight? Okay, so we're going to have this panel. And then right after, Zane is going to give a little talk about kind of like the ins and outs of what happened at Instacart, his experience designing as the founding designer. Am I missing anything else? Yeah. Okay, cool. First question to kick things off. What does the relationship between a founder and a founding designer look like?
That's a good question. I think, one thing that comes to mind for me is I always had like a mini tagline for myself, and it was building visions for visionaries. And so I feel like it's like you're kind of like their partner in crime. And so your job is to kind of be able to get in their head and understand not only what they want, but what they need. And sometimes that's challenging, right? And so from the very beginning, I've always seen myself as someone that's pushed and challenged CEOs. And I always like to say, like, I can be a superpower for you, or I could do what the hell you want me to tell you to do, like what you tell me to do, and you choose. But you pay me a lot to do what you tell you to do. So you might want to, take my perspective and everything that I bring and consider it. So I think we're really a part to not only be the voice of the user in the room, but really like challenge assumptions. Last thing I was at, and ask the right questions.
Why don't you go first?
I was actually about to jump on with questions, because I think you're working with a founder. They obviously know the industry. They obviously have a lot of ideas about the industry. And I think one of the most helpful things that a founding designer can do is to help a founder navigate the forest of knowledge within their own mind, get them to think more deeply about the sets of problems, the opportunities. And I think the right questions sometimes are just as helpful as visual explorations. Although I do think that, I think it's a disservice as a founding designer to do design work only within the process of what's assigned in this cycle, and you wait downstream for things. You just want to get as close to the founder and, like you said, in their brain as possible. If you can collapse the process of the founder having an idea, something worth exploring, to getting something visual and helping them imagine what the future can look like, I think that's kind of what makes the role so fun too.
That's a good point. I'll tag onto that. You're often uncluttering sort of minds or thoughts or meetings. I would often just kind of put myself out there and say, it sounds like you're talking about something like this, or what I'm hearing is something like this, and you're trying to isolate what are the key touch points or the important bits of a product or a feature you're trying to build. And that's actually kind of grown into just a designer skill set that's relevant today, even as just sort of digesting info and making that into a visual medium for people. And then it's also can be kind of personal for me, at least. Like I remember once, like being on the balcony of If This Then That, apologizing to my CEO because I like put out like a little graph that nobody like had ever, he didn't look at, and I guess it wasn't to like his standards, and it definitely was like a very awkward moment. But I guess that just goes to show that like how like close you are to, or you can be to someone you're working with.
Yeah, so in running Founders Inc., there's like dozens of founders here and founding teams, and I think maybe like 1 out of the 100 has a founding designer. So really been pushing them to do that. A lot of them don't understand what that means or what to do. The easiest way that I could explain it to them was that it's just a strategic thought partner. You're not you're hiring the designer as an IC to say, hey, go make this thing, bring it to life, whatever I'm telling you. This is a person that is in the room with you making decisions. The design process is inherently like doing some research, identifying a problem, framing the problem, coming up with the solution, and then expressing it. People only think design is that end part, but it's actually the whole thing. And what does that whole thing sound like? Well, it sounds like the startup process. It's like lean startup. You learn like the same things, right? And so people who are kind of trained in design and design thinking, they think this way, and they can help people challenge and tease out their ideas. And so these are people in the room that like you should have in product discussions. You should have in market discussions. Like you should send them to do the user research, right? Not just you, or be there with you. Like that's how you should be collaborating with them, not thinking like, oh, like I need to make some visuals and this person should come on. Like that's not it. And not all designers like are meant for that, right? Different types of people, but like those that have that mindset, it's just so insanely powerful. It's like a completely different way of working. And I just wish that so much more people can experience that.
Okay, I have maybe a related question. Figma just announced today the AI-powered prompts to UI, right? What do you guys think that's going to do to the role of design at a startup? No comment.
I mean, I think it goes off of what was just said a little bit, where it's like, if the role of design is simply just execute, I don't know if you're really tapping into what a founding designer can be. I do think it's like a founding designer has to operate at, like you said, like the market level. It's such an amazing opportunity because, especially when you're like pre-product market fit or even just like figuring out how to scale, the designer gets to think about positioning. And that's like such a more impactful way to contribute to what a company can become than thinking solely within the confines of like finding problems and solving problems. Obviously very, very important, but you get to like, how do we actually want to fit into this market? And what can I, as the designer, visualize and help bring to life, even at a company strategy level? Like I think founding designers kind of are mini founders in some way. And so, yeah, like AI tools for sure, we're gonna be able to generate a bunch of ideas. Is it still kind of a toy a little bit? Yeah. But you can start to imagine a future where it becomes much more impactful. But the way that it would be impactful is by helping you be more efficient in the things that, maybe were more time consuming anyway, just drawing a bunch of frames and filling in content. And so it's like, well, what does that do? Well, it frees you up to make a more strategic impact by working closely with the founder. And that's what I'm hoping is going to happen anyway.
Yeah, I'm not going to predict anything, but I see it as tools, ways to just modify your workflow. Dodging and burning used to be actually a physical thing you would do in before Photoshop, and so it's like just more ways to, as they put it, get over your creative sort of blank canvas fear. But you could also, as you said, like you can kind of imagine it being pretty sophisticated, and that would be great, to be honest. If Figma could generate 3 versions, 5 versions, or whatever of a flow for me, and I could like pick and choose and iterate and tweak through those, like that's great. Like I'm not getting paid by the pixel; I'm getting paid by sort of like what I'm putting out, or really actually more like the collaborative effort of putting something together and putting it out. And so, yeah, we're more than pixels, obviously, but it's a real opportunity to develop taste and then like execute taste, because all this stuff comes out and it's like so generic. But if you like the AI stuff, which cool, it's but it's getting there. Taste is, I mean, not yet, but not something that's replicated. But
I think it's just about speed, really. Like, it enables you to do more, to get more ideas, and then to figure out where you want to go next. Like, it's a tool. For some early stage founders that don't have like a designer, maybe it delays, if they view a designer as an IC, maybe it delays when they get a designer, because it's like, oh, I can actually like prototype my idea myself. Like, and that's great. And it'll help people move faster. For the designer, like, they'll be able to maybe come up with some more perspectives for themselves and then figure out where to go next. So maybe kind of do more with less.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot about a couple of things when it comes to design and AI. I think one is I definitely feel like it's a superpower and an enhancer, and I feel like it's just like any other tool. And so it really comes down to your imagination, your creativity, and we all might have access to the same tools, but we're not going to have the same perspective, the same experiences, the same imagination, whatever, right? And so I don't think we should be intimidated. I think we should just tap in deeper to that creativity and imagination, and it, may the best prompt win, so to speak. But also on the other hand, I agree with everything that you guys just said, that, it's like a multiplier. I read, I think it was like Harvard or somebody who did a study that was like, if you're already a high performer, if you're already like crushing it, it's just gonna like 20x your output. And so that's pretty incredible to think about. Like, if we're already like digging in, doing great work, it's gonna enable us to do even more of that. And then also just like flex, like we've been talking about, not only just the generative aspect of design, there's a lot of stages of design, and generating ideas and visuals is one thin slice of it. And so hopefully it also frees us up to do some of those other things.
Just only because no one really said this, but like it also enables more people to design and make things. Like from personal experience, all the code completion stuff that's not Figma related is for me a huge enabler for prototyping, just getting ideas out there, and actually feeling closer to being able to put like an app out, which is, I'm just not really like a developer. I've tried, not gonna happen. But like when you can actually just, I can get a little bit closer to the, the goal line, so anyways, that sort of is happening or can happen with people who aren't designing right now because they're intimidated by Figma or what have you. So, yeah.
Not getting paid by the pixel and may the best prompt win, two signature lines. On that note, when design is so good at playing a role in evil, guns, the jewel, fracking with the diamond build, drill bit, slots with gambling, how does good design safeguard against evil ethics with the emergence of AI?
I mean, I don't really have an answer, but people around me used to always talk about how design is a neutral force, right? Like many things in the world are neutral forces. They can be used for good or bad. Some of the most like horrendous things like in the history of the world, like the Nazis and stuff, were some of the greatest like brand campaigns, and they used it amazingly for like the most evil thing that you could possibly do. And you can't necessarily control that. There's other things people are doing to control AI, like setting up kind of like committees and things like that, and laying out ethics and standards and saying like, these are all like treaties that we agree to kind of abide by. But I don't know if there's what you can actually do to defend against it. I think people should just know that like design is a tool, just like anything else, and whoever wields it can kind of use it for whatever they want. And if they're really good at it, they can make pretty substantial impact, both good and bad. So I think we'll see how this all plays out, just like even with AI in general. And there's a lot of smart people like working on stuff right now. We're seeing a lot of companies being spun up Some of the OpenAI guys left, and they're trying to talk about like how do we actually safeguard against these things and protect against it. So yeah.
That's a tough question. I won't pretend to have an answer either, but I think like for me, when it comes to design, like an underlying principle is kind of centered around empathy. I would say one of the things that could separate us as designers is just being able to tap into, you know, humanity, our soul, the human experience. And so I hope that the powers that be that are kind of fostering the creation of this, you know, super powerful technology is kind of leading with empathy, leading with care. And a lot of times to do that, it's like you have to be able to leap ahead. You can't just think about like, okay, what's the feature, what's the product in front of us, but what's the output, what's the outcome, how does it impact people's lives down the line? And sometimes it's hard to think that far ahead. And so it's like, I had an executive coach one time that was always like, think about all the things that could like crush you. And like, I hope that the people are thinking like that. Like, what were the things like all the new features, racing for, you know, larger context windows and bigger LLMs, whatever. But like, what are the things that can go wrong? We have to think about that too. And I think it's so easy to focus on all the things that can go right, but what happens if things go wrong? So, yeah.
I'm going to crib a little bit from Ben Thompson podcast that they recently talked about the FTC suit against Adobe. And one of the sort of main issues they bring up is I think it was choosing the Creative Cloud plan and the sort of hiddenness of the cancellation fees. And again, cribbing here, but effectively it comes down to like, it was like a 50% would be your fee if you canceled early. And, you know, they went on in the podcast to talk about, so again, cribbing, but yeah, probably could have A/B tested. Oh, probably keep a few more people if they don't really know which, you know, version to pick, and 50% is not $300 or something like that. And it was just kind of like hard to find the pattern. And I wasn't in the room. I didn't make any of these patterns. But it comes down to just like, yeah, you could A/B test stuff, especially here in tech. You can A/B test stuff to the point where like, well, this converts like, 2% better. But like, you should just do the right thing. Like, it's kind of like, it's like the role of the designer is you just do the right thing. It's like, it's so hard sometimes because you can't quantify a lot of these things. And that's why you have to be good at communicating and empathizing. But yeah, for when so it's not evil. It's a different level. But I do think that's like what's in your power is just always advocate for just doing the right thing, and you can't go wrong.
Yeah, I won't add that much more. I think what you all said was good, but the issues exist today. Like AI is really just an accelerant, and so I think a lot of the same temptations to do wrong by users exist today. But I also believe that the majority of times you are incentivized as a company, if you want to succeed, to do right by your users. And like, yes, the diamond tips. It's like, yeah, I can see the parallel. I also think that there is it has less impact on real people. Design has impact on real people in the vast majority of situations. And if it doesn't, and you are using it for harm, I think you could do that today. It's just going to be a little bit easier. And I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that, honestly.
So this next question actually is inspired by a conversation we had. Oh, like this? Higher? My hand? There. Okay. Sorry. Learning how to use a mic could be better designed. So, yeah, this next question is one that Rid posed us that I thought was really interesting, which is can you talk a little bit about your relationship, each of you, to designing inside the box and then totally outside of the box? Like a place where you brought the design discipline to an area or an arena that most people would never expect to see it.
I guess I have to start, huh? If it's my question. I guess I'll start outside of the box. And I think this is why I like being the first designer, because there's an infinite amount of problems to solve in an early stage company, and you kind of just get to pick how you want to contribute based off of the skill set that you personally have. So for me, like, I really like marketing. I like thinking about, again, like positioning, marketing funnels. And so like as the first designer, nobody was going to tell me, hey, you know what, you should like think about, this is in the context of Maven, so it's a bunch of instructors who are thinking about courses. And you're not just like solving problems, you're almost thinking about what are the mental models that we want to instill in instructors to get them to be less intimidated by putting themselves out there and starting really, really high level. But I still think that's like, design, right? And then you can slowly, you're working backwards towards pixels. And what's kind of cool is when you're in an early stage company, like I got to come up with the mental models, talk to all of the users. And by the way, like you said, like the nice thing about being a founding designer is you just slide into the DMs of all the early users, right? Like you don't have to go through anyone. There's no middleman when you're the first person. So like put things out there, try prototypes. And then I was actually able to like come up with a way to like think about the webinar to even release these new features. And that's another element of it too, where it's like, I think design in the early stage involves thinking strategically about the go-to-market strategy. It's not just about putting pixels together. It's like, no, actually, how do we want to wrap this? And what's the best way to get this in front of users and get them excited about it? And so it's just, I think the reason that I even talked about the box is like, a lot of people in more established companies, the bigger they are, the more that you are contained into like your little slice of the workflow or of the product. And when you are like a founding designer, you get to just kind of expand what falls under the design umbrella. And to an extent, it's kind of whatever you want to put under the umbrella, because again, there's just an unlimited amount of ways that you can make an impact on the company.
I'm not sure if I have a good answer either, but I feel like I did all my good outside the box thinking in school, frankly. Putting on concerts, and I majored in industrial design and stuff, and that was always like the space that I felt most comfortable kind of doing anything. I think once I had to start operating in platforms or within constraints of a product market fit, I feel like I kind of always got into the inside the box thing, but I don't have a good answer. No, I'm going to pass.
Who here is not a designer? Great, amazing. So this is going to be for you, and then for all the designers, this is my case for why when you become a founder, that your co-founder should also be a designer, and that you shouldn't shy away from that. People ask me, like, well, what do you mean, like things are different when you collaborate with a designer? Like, and in this will be two examples of inside the box and outside the box. Like, okay, so say you're designing an onboarding flow, right? You're designing an onboarding flow, and a regular team, like non-designers, will be like, all right, well, what do we need? Well, it needs to be like low friction, it needs to be smooth, maybe we'll use Google OAuth, like people, we can't ask them too many questions, functionally, cool. Yeah, makes sense, and that's probably all true. In designers, they might ask a question like, well, how do we want people to feel when they onboard, right? And you might start asking questions like, well, what if the product you're designing is maybe a community of designers, for example, like that's the product. And so you might start saying, well, what is it like when people join other design communities? And you might be like, well, maybe you feel like an outcast, or maybe you have imposter syndrome and like you don't know what to do. And through all of this conversation, maybe the root that you get to is like, oh, this is about making people feel welcome, right? That is not a conversation that like a regular founding team will have. And then when you get to this idea of like, oh, we want to make people feel welcome, well, how do we do that? Well, like, let's look to the world. Like, how do people actually feel welcome? Like, maybe like grandmas, like stuff you full of food. Like that's one way of feeling welcome. Like when you go on an airline, they give you like a free pair of slippers, or like the DoubleTree gives you like a cookie, or maybe when you're at work, there's like a start buddy, right? Like these are all different examples of like how to make somebody feel welcome. And so then you're looking at your onboarding and you're being like, you know what, this is like a really interesting moment. Like what's our version of like the grandma stuffing you full of food here? And that change in how you design, that little thing that you add, is what's going to make your product like so much different. And like that is the power. And that's what I want people to realize. Like this level of conversation doesn't happen. And me being here at Founders Inc., being like the only one with this background, is actually like very hard to have these conversations with people. Like you got to draw it out of them. And eventually maybe you'll get there. But people who have that practice and are used to like ping-ponging these questions and figuring these things out and like care to dig deep will design it in a different way. So like I've had both conversations, like, and most of it is like the former, like just basic. Yeah, it's just like this functional thing, like add these fields, whatever, like we're good to go. And like that's how they think about all stages of the process, but there's like very little emotion. And so I think there's like a lot to be done here. And I think that's, to me, it's kind of like the next frontier of like what users actually need.
Great answer. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think it comes down to like, how do you be purposeful and how do you kind of get down to like the why? Because it's easy as designers to want to be different, and so like you want to do something that's out of the box, something that's, you know, unique or novel, or, you know, something that you just might think is cool. But you have to kind of come back to like the why, and you know, sometimes that unique thing is not better. You know, sometimes following the pattern that's already been done 100 times is the right way to go. Even though we may want to be more creative, we may want to be more expressive. And so it's really kind of knowing when is the right time to kind of pull out those kind of things. If I could tell a quick story, I remember when we were designing the mailbox app, you know, I was on the hunt. You know, I've always treated design like, you know, like a sport. It's been like my sport, and I got like Mamba mentality. And, you know, I'm from the south side of Chicago. It took me a lot to get to Silicon Valley, to get to tech. And, you know, I'm going to be real with y'all. I wanted to kick ass. I wanted to kick ass. Like everybody who, like, you know, told me I wasn't a culture fit, everyone who told me that, you know, or maybe they didn't even tell me, but just the fact that
Joke's on them.
just the fact that I didn't really fit in, and the fact that I wasn't really accepted, and the fact that, you know, just by the way of who I am, I wouldn't be believed in. I wanted to kick everybody ass. I had a chip on my shoulder. And so to me, that meant, you know, if they did it this way, I was going to do it that way, right? If everyone, you know, had buttons that were, you know, 44 pixels, I was going to make mine 56 pixels. I just wanted to zig when everyone else was zagging, and I just wanted to push for like, what is this going to be the dope thing that people are going to be fired up about? And I've learned that, you know, every product and every problem may not need that, and so it's about knowing when to kind of pull those types of things out of your tool belt, and it's about kind of aligning the solution with the consumer and the why and the purpose.
All right, I'll take both mics.
Oh.
Do we have time for one more question? How should founders be thinking more like designers? And how should designers be thinking more like founders?
So for founders, I think it's a lot of the things that we've been saying, right? It's like diving deeper. Like it's easy. I love your point around the onboarding flow, because it's easy to go on mob.design or, you know, ask freaking AI to design the onboarding flow when you're going to get something that, you know, is following the patterns, right? It's following the model. And so for founders, it's about going deeper. It's a lot deeper than that. It's about, you know, understanding who the consumer is. Like I said, empathy, understanding what they're going through when they're using your product, understanding the role that your product's gonna, you know, have an impact in their life. How's it gonna affect them? And even before that, I've worked with a lot of founders that don't even know who they're designing for. They don't even know who's going to use the thing. And so going deeper than the pixels, and understanding, who you're building for and how what you're building is going to impact them, I think is very important. And then for designers, I think it's about us kind of opening up our aperture a little bit. It's easy to kind of be in our rabbit hole. It's easy to want to just be like, okay, give me my Asana task and let me put on my headphones and do what I do. But I encourage you to get a deeper understanding about the business, get a deeper understanding about what types of things are driving the decisions. If you get briefed to design something, ask why. And if you don't have the direct connection with maybe a CEO, I would encourage you to build relationships with other people, build relationships with the PM or the sales team or whoever. But I think the more that you can understand about the business and your customers and the KPIs of your company, the better you're going to be equipped to make design decisions, and the better you're going to know when to not take things emotionally, frankly, right? I mean, because it's easy to kind of put our heart in our work, but the broader the context that we have, I think the better we'll be set up to kind of knock out those tasks.
That was great. What was the question again?
How should designers be thinking more like founders, and how should founders be thinking more like designers?
Okay, cool. Right. Well, I think a few things have been touched on. I need to just echo your point about onboarding. Really, it's so often people would say, "Oh, not enough people are clicking through this," or they're not, they're entering their phone number wrong or something. But that higher level question of like, what are you trying to make somebody do here? It's to set up a profile, but okay, well, why, right? And I can relate like healthcare or health apps and health startups are often like this, where they just want everybody to be better and they want to cure, everybody, and that's great. And healthcare for all, and that sounds great. But it's often like too much and too vague, and everybody's different. And if you can really like be specific about something, especially as complex as health, you can actually go super deep on something that is maybe like an underserved condition or lifestyle, whatever that might be. And what I found is like you actually have more highly engaged people, but like a fewer, like you're not treating millions and millions of people, maybe a few hundred, but they're really engaged with your experience because you've thought through sort of everything that you've thought through everything that they might encounter. And I think it sounds great to start, again, staying with health, start these companies or apps or whatever it might be that can make people better. But I think it's frankly equally like more effective to just kind of be really deep and focused on one or two things or something that really matters. And I guess as a designer, yeah, like you should like it's actually there's a lot to get excited about if you go into you want to like learn about ALS. Like it's dark and deep but there like you can become that person who not owns that's bad terminology, who can be like the DRI, the designated responsible individual for like this entire experience and know like what someone with a condition or what have you needs to do in order to be set up. Like, do they need to set up a profile photo? Maybe not. Maybe they actually need to have an app that's more focused on dark mode because they're sensitive to light or something like that. So that's all, I think. Just trying not to boil the ocean with things and actually get as deep as your user, your customer might be. So
I think if you're a founder, you start a company because you have some insight, you have noticed something about the world, the way the world works, you have some kind of an opportunity, and I think it's easy to assume that you know. And so a way that a founder can act more like a designer is to assume you don't know and really ask the questions to get deeper, go beyond solving problems. And I really like the onboarding because I think something like you were kind of getting at is like founders don't often think about shifting a user's emotion. And I think thinking through things and looking at opportunities that way unlocks a depth in what you can create in the user experience. That's how you differentiate. in a lot of markets. So that's one way. I think another thing that designers are good at that founders can start to think more about is, you know, founders often have like a picture of what the world should look like in their head, and the challenge is the execution gap is how do you get there, right? And one of the most difficult things, and something that I see a lot of founders mess up, is sequencing. Sequencing can be hard. And I think designers are pretty good at systems thinking and identifying, you know, which features or which opportunities could serve as a building block to more quickly unlock something else over here, and being able to sequence ideas effectively to figure out the right path to get to that end state that you have in your head as a founder, I think is something that designers are good at and that founders could emulate. The flip side of that, totally agree with like seeing things through the business lens, like 100%. I think designers should care deeply about like the inner workings of the business. Like actually what are the economics of this company that we were trying to build? You know, like you got to work backwards from that, especially in the early stages. If we flip it though, it's like, you know, founders are so good at that end state. I think a failure in the early stage as a designer would be if you are just obsessively solving short run problems. There are a million of them. And so it feels like you have this infinite amount of work, and it's so easy to get caught up in shipping. Every once in a while, though, you have to take time to take a giant step back and just imagine what the future can be and help vision cast. And I think that really ties into like that founder relationship too.
I love everything that was said. I completely agree. The only thing that will add is like, I wish people focused more on designing experiences versus like the frames of a product. And it's up to the designer to like push the founders to do these things. And the founders should also be thinking this way. Like, you know, I'm a COO here and I'm an ops, and I have to live in DocuSign, and it sucks. And not that the product is bad, it's just like a very boring thing to be doing. And just like 2 months ago or a month ago, like DocuSign like rebranded. And I landed on their page, and it's just like this pink and purple, and there's these shapes, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. And then I go to log in, and it's the exact same fucking thing. And they've changed like one button color, and I'm like, this is awful. And it's just like, you convinced me now that DocuSign is fun. And it's this cool thing, and like you chose these colors, it's like, oh, it's like playful and stuff. But like, what about the experience reflected that at all? So like for the designers, it like sucks. They've asked to do something and they maybe came up with something that was good, but like it didn't find its way into the product like at all. And I think more and more people have to be thinking about like, what do we stand for as a company? Like if we're, you know, what does my brand like reflect? And then like, how does that show up? And it doesn't have to be in big ways. It can be in small ways. But it almost like I hate DocuSign more now. Like, you know, it's like they did this thing and now it's just like I hate you more. Like this is worse. Like you made me think it was going to be cool and fun, and now it's not. And I hate you. So yeah, just like try to think more about designing experiences.
Wonderful. Thank you. A round of applause.